your seat. I call Senator Pratt. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, President. As I stand before you today, I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. So while I live on Whadjuk Noongar country, the privilege of serving in this place has connected me to Yaru, Gidja, Yamaji, Bardijawi, Nananjara and many other wonderful communities. It is a connection that has taught me a profound truth, that progress happens when we stop seeing others as strangers and start recognising our common interests and humanity. Paul Keating gave his historic Redfern speech, and in it he said, "We practiced discrimination and exclusion. It was our ignorance and prejudice and our failure to imagine these things being done to us." I've got a great-great-great-great-uncle named Alfred Howard. He led the search party that found Burke and Wills. My mother originates from Victoria. He witnessed firsthand the consequences of our failure to learn from First Nations people. So as Burke lay dying at Cooper's Creek, it is well documented today that his racial arrogance prevented him from learning and asking for help from First Australians. And today it is in our interests, all of our interests, if we want to live an abundant, sustainable life, that we draw on the knowledge of First Nations people, knowledge accrued over 6 millennia. And for me, the gap between Australia's legacy of colonialism and the needs of First Nations people still remains too great, and that this is important to all of our well-being, for our well-being as a nation. The issues confronting First Nations community cannot be addressed by treating communities as the problem. We can only step forward by listening to the oldest living country, the oldest living culture on earth. A culture that has adapted and renewed itself over the last 200 years since colonisation. A failure of imagination, the inability to see our interests align with others, lies at the heart of so many challenges we face, both as individuals and as a society and as a nation. I have to say it was a pleasure to see how we respond to these needs in the Labor budget delivered last night, from cost of living relief, climate change, support for families and more. In 2014, when my first term in this place ended, I stood on the other side, 6 months pregnant, with Jasper. Hello, Jasper. He's now 10. Giving my valedictory. I became pregnant with you, Jasper, between the 2013 election and the 2014 Senate rerun, after the AEC lost all those ballot papers. It was a very challenging time for me personally on many fronts, but also there was a loss shared by so many of my Labor colleagues, where we knew that some of the reasons behind our defeat were of our own making. But we've worked very hard to rebuild and earn the trust of Australians, and we seek to hold that trust secure. Jasper, when I returned to Parliament, you were nearly 2. I have in fact Malcolm Turnbull to thank for my return, because he called a double dissolution election. I remember talking to you, Jasper, about going to work in Canberra again, and you pointed to the sky and said, "Plane." I'm pretty sure you thought that coming to Canberra meant that I was literally up in the air in an aeroplane all the time. It did feel that way sometimes. Jasper, I'm enormously proud of you and of our family. I want to thank Dennis and Stephen and my wonderful wife Beck for making it possible for me to serve in the Senate for these last 9 years. Back in 2001, as a state legislative councillor, I was involved in changing the laws around access to IVF in Western Australia. I was part of campaigns before that time that asked West Australians not to imagine those, the wish of de facto couples, single women, including lesbians, as strangers in our desires to have a family. Without that change, I would never have had the privilege, Jasper, of being your mother, because you simply wouldn't exist. So I know that you know that the work of parliamentarians is important. The decisions we make in this place matter both in Australia and overseas. But to me, Jasper, you're more important than all of that. I know you're upset about missing your school puppet show tomorrow, but thank you for being at this puppet show with me today. We both experience that feeling of missing out sometimes, and this place, like your puppet show, holds a unique magic, a stage on which to recognise and respond to the many issues affecting Australia and the world, with a new iteration of sometimes old debates every year. And in these past 9 years since my return, I really feel they've been incredible, from defending hard-fought Labor reforms in opposition to embracing the opportunities of government. From marriage equality to COVID, from manufacturing to employment, social security, immigration, blocking regressive industrial relations changes, and engaging in ever-evolving debates about rights and freedoms. It has been such a great privilege to play a role in these debates and more. The journey to marriage equality was long and deeply personal, as it is for others of us in the chamber. But I was so proud to walk along in that path alongside so many Australians who demanded fairness and dignity. And I hope that my time in this place has shown young, queer, LGBTIQ+ Australians that there is a place for them in politics and in shaping our country's future. On that note, Senator Wong, thank you for placing me on the committee that established the guardrails for implementing marriage equality, and it was such a great pleasure to work with you, Senator Dean Smith. We need strong institutions that listen to citizens, and the Senate's capacity to do that is indeed a powerful one. And of course, in this context, Senate committee work is key. When compared to other upper houses, our role in reform through our committees exceeds that of other parliaments around the world. And of course, as I look at the clerk, we could not accomplish this without the hard work and commitment of all parliaments, officers and staff. I thank you and all of the staff here, the clerk's committee staff, Black Rod, for your steady moderation of this institution. I also thank security, Comcar drivers, cleaners, catering staff, the library, building services, the Parliamentary Budget Office, attendants. You all make this place function, despite the tendency of politicians to create chaos by sitting late and engaging in heated debates, as we may well do tonight. We are in a very dynamic place, and having visited other parliaments, I've seen that the access of civil society, unions, advocates, business, health consumer groups and more to this building, and therefore to power, is such a great asset to our nation. This openness is special. Please protect it. It helps us recognise the issues that are important to the nation. In my time in the Senate, I've seen how we need to face the critical need to break down barriers that make us see the needs of others as strangers unaligned to our own interests. When we see someone who doesn't look like us, sound like us, act like us, or love like us, our first instinct is often rooted in fear or judgment. There's a popular quote on TikTok at the moment from US Governor Pritzker. He said, "We survived as a species by being suspicious of things we are unfamiliar with." But he goes on to say, "This instinct, this animal brain, it limits our potential. When we fail to evolve past these primal urges, our thinking lacks imagination and creativity. Our problem-solving becomes narrow and ineffective. And most importantly, we miss the opportunity to learn from and connect with the rich diversity of human experience around us." I've witnessed this throughout my parliamentary career, from the struggles for marriage equality to the recognition of First Nations voices, for the fight for transgender rights, protection of vulnerable Australians from predatory systems like robo-debt. In each case, progress only happened when we stopped seeing strangers and started seeing people. I've been reading an essay by Palestinian writer Isabella Hamad. It's titled "Recognising the Stranger." She writes of recognition versus denial. Recognition means acknowledging our shared humanity and the legitimacy of others' experiences, even when they're different from our own. But she also goes on to say, with recognition must come action. She commented on the extremity of language from the Israeli government, dehumanising those being bombed. 50,000 lives or more. But as a nation, we have citizens with interests on both sides of this conflict. And just as the Berlin Wall fell, apartheid in South Africa ended, and all throughout history, great civilisations rise and fall, nothing is in stone. We always have the power and an obligation to look to the future and to shape it with the stranger in mind. The transformative power of recognition I saw firsthand when our party caucus welcomed First Nations voices like Senator Dodson, Senator McCarthy, Mariam Scrimgeour, Linda Burney, Jana Stewart. Our discussions changed fundamentally. Today it feels like we're no longer deliberating on the lives of strangers. We can discuss what is important to us all. And that means a great deal to me. And the same principle applies across every domain in life and decision-making. The success of Australia's response to HIV has always meant not treating those affected with stigma or discrimination. Our progress on marriage equality came when Australians recognised that our relationships and families have the same qualities as any other: love, kindness and support. And our strongest public institutions are those that listen to and serve all citizens, not just a privileged few. And in saying this, I think particularly of Fair Work, Medicare, the PBS, the Net Zero Agency, the Department of Industry even, seeking to drive economic investment and opportunity for communities around the nation. And my best experiences with colleagues in this place have never focused on our differences. We've always sought to replace fear with curiosity. And in committee work, when taking evidence, to ask collaboratively, in a collaborative way with your colleagues, what do we need to learn from this person or this evidence? It's a practical wisdom. And as a Senate, we should always keep an eye on the need to reform our institutions when they're out of touch, out of date, or leaving people behind, so that all voices can be heard. We want public services to be adequately resourced to respond to citizens' needs, where we recognise that no parent should be deprived of a relationship with their child due to poverty, and no child should be deprived of basic health care like immunisation here in Australia or overseas. A world where we understand that there can be no strangers among us if we are the truly multicultural nation we claim to be. And this is a value in today's day and age, in a complicated world, that we must continue to share. No stranger to us in Palestine or Israel, just as we will move to see no strangers in our support for the end of apartheid. And speaking of strangers, transgender Australians have been talked about in this place by some as if they are strangers to citizenship in their own nation. These debates reinforce harmful stereotypes about how men and women should behave and exist in the world. And this ultimately limits all of us. The policing of who's allowed to have a masculine or feminine attribute. It's a ridiculous debate that distracts from the real issues. To address these issues, we need to listen to transgender people and let them speak for themselves. Extreme debates about same-sex parents or marriage equality are no longer the norm. Australians are listening to transgender Australians, just like they did on the calls for marriage equality. And for us in this place, Australians overall would much prefer politicians to be supporting issues that actually affect their daily lives. They understand that stopping discrimination does not cost money. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. And that these attacks on transgender people undermine the human rights of all. As I leave the Senate, I reflect on what this journey has taught me about the connection between recognition and action. And recognition isn't just an abstract concept, it demands action. And some of the highlights in this place that we've seen, from child migrants, institutional child abuse, the apology to stolen generations and veteran suicide. These are all issues we recognise that we have to respond deeply to. And in this context, I'm proud to have stood firmly on the side of transgender rights, sex workers, people living with HIV, vulnerable children, traditional owners, and many other people throughout my career. Recognising that social and economic exclusion means you need to take action, and that taking action doesn't benefit the few, it benefits us all. Deep relationships with brave constituents and advocates has been deeply fulfilling, enriching my understanding and effectiveness as a senator. And from all of these people, I have learned a great deal. Justice cannot be sought and found without people speaking for themselves. From issues spanning from the sterling collapse, robo-debt, the misuse of centre pay, dowry abuse, immigration rights, aged care, manufacturing, consumer rights, unions, sex workers, LGBTI health, children's policy, HIV. All of these groups and advocates have been instrumental in my drive for the pursuit of justice and positive change. When we truly see others in their full humanity, we must not be passive. We must not be passive in the face of injustice or indifference. And it's wonderful to see how my colleagues in this place understand that recognising issues in our society must compel us to step forward and make a difference. I've tried very hard to embody this principle in my career in this place, and I ask my colleagues who remain in this place to stay brave in your pursuit of justice. Stay curious. Your recognition of what matters to Australia must be paired with the courage to act upon it, even when it's difficult. I want to thank Steve McCartney, State Secretary of the Australian Manufacturing Workers Union. It's been a collective effort to build political support for important workplace and income and industry issues. But your leadership is also about recognition and action. Your leadership on a just transition in Collie is showing the rest of the nation what needs to be done. You've turned insecurity and navigated that with recognition and action on issues that others remain in denial on. To the union movement and the ACTU, I'm proud to have been a servant of your movement, our movement, standing up for workers' rights, particularly in my role as chair of the Senate Employment Committee in the past. And Tony, you're doing a sterling job now. I thank the Senate for the opportunity to help the lives, rights and needs of Australian workers so that they be recognised and reformed in this place. To my Labor colleagues, our collective commitment to the common good is a wonderful asset to the nation. Each of us has a great privilege of helping to realise the values of the Labor Party. To my West Australian colleagues, thank you for standing up for our state and for being great campaigners. It is a privilege to have been entrusted for so many years with the values and opinions of so many thousands of WA Labor members. I want to thank all of those members now for handing out at polling booths, door knocking and sharing your values and opinions. And I particularly want to thank those who handed out back in 2014 on that rainy day when I stood as the only person on the polling booth in Gidgegannup. I want to thank the electors of Western Australia, regardless of how you voted. I hope you feel I have served you well. And I particularly and proudly want to thank the broad network of party members who are Rainbow Labor. You've given me tremendous personal support. You have been at the core of what Labor governments have been able to do to support LGBTIQ+ Australians. And I will always remember the National Conference of 2011 where we changed the platform to support marriage equality as a highlight. I'm going to give a shout out to Bill Botel to thank him for all he's taught me and for his own contribution to the causes we share. And I want to express my deep gratitude to all of those who've made my work possible. I'm very proud to have been part of an Albanese Labor government, and in the many years of working with the Prime Minister, he has consistently provided stability, made progress, and dealt with complexity while keeping sight of the public interest that guides our party. We need leadership with this kind of navigation skills, and our Prime Minister has this in spades. I've got many colleagues I'd like to thank for the opportunity to contribute to reforms. Bill Shorten on centre pay, Tanya Plibersek on midwifery, Mark Dreyfus, hate speech, discrimination and more, Senator O'Neill and my colleagues from WA, Zanita Mascarenas, a commitment to protecting people from financial abuse, Mark Butler for including me in your work on HIV, Jed Carney, LGBTIQ+ health, and Julian Hill. We've known each other for some 25 years. I want to acknowledge the many things we've worked together on, but more than that, more personally, for your friendship and drinking tea late at night, sitting in bed like two old nanas. I have a great deal of gratitude to all my colleagues for all this and more. And there are too many other collaborations and outcomes with colleagues to mention at this time and right across the Parliament. But I thank you all. I have friends and comrades who I thanked in 2013 who've remained supporters and allies on this journey, and I thank you again without naming you. Many others I'll never have a chance to thank. But I do want to say thank you to Tim Cahalan. Tim asked me to call him a god or something in this speech. But as a person with a disability, I want to thank you for your visibility and voice in our party and for standing up against robo-debt. Your perspective and advocacy have strengthened the collective work of our movement. Our party is always more effective with diverse voices at the table, so again we can recognise and respond to what's important. I depart knowing that this place is brimming with talent and dedicated Labor ministers who share my values. It makes it easier to leave. I don't need to watch the new iterations, feel the need to be on the stage in the next iteration of debates. It does make it much easier to leave. It will soon include Ellie Whittaker, the first female Secretary of West Australian Labor in our more than 100-year history, who's ready to carry the torch. Ellie is, in fact, has worked with me in the past in my office, and I want to thank all my staff for all they have done, for the time spent helping constituents, for listening to people on the phone, for strategising with me, giving me sound advice and keeping me organised. You've delivered a great deal to constituents on issues and things that have affected them that I will never even know of. Nikki McKimmie, thank you. Alison Elgar, thank you. Jamie Page, thank you. And Tanya McCartney, we worked together a very long time. I thank you. I want to thank all of those who've worked with me since I was first elected to the State Parliament in 2001. Your loyalty, dedication, shared commitment to justice, your agency on issues of importance to us is just as important as mine. Ashley, Andy, Alana, John and Kate, just to mention a few from the past. Oh, and Nikki Slevin up there too. I've worked with some of you for such a long time, and long after our work together has ended, our friendships are strong. Finally, to my family, my wife Beck, thank you for marrying me on the 4th of June in 2003. Thank you to my mother Sandra, my father Greg, Nicholas and Fleur. Thank you for making it possible for me to serve and for being there when politics was tough. Whether in this place or anywhere else in our nation, the work we do when we recognise our shared humanity lifts us all up. It elevates us above our animal instincts, above our fears and prejudice, into a place where we can see further and find solutions. And so to all of those I've worked with and made friends with in this place, please don't be a stranger. I still want to look to new horizons with you. Looking to the future, I will draw on my values to help me recognise my next endeavour, whatever that is to be. But I know in the meantime I'm looking forward to school pickups, not missing just the school events, being home for dinner with Beck and just for more often. I thank you all for the privilege of serving in this Senate. Thank you.